The last few days, I have mentioned the Amazon sales algorithm. So it's Wednesday the 30th, and we are coming up on Halloween, so happy Halloween. This will probably be out tomorrow, just because workflow works good. Happy Halloween, everybody. Enjoy. Be safe. The Amazon sales algorithm is a black box system. You don't get to see inside, I don't get to see inside, nobody gets to see inside. Now, keeping that in mind, everybody got themselves a wrapped gift at some point. And most of us as kids could sit down and stack those gifts based upon what was inside. You could pick up that flat rectangular box, shake it once, and just call out closed. You pick up that weird shaped box, shake it, makes that rattling sound, set that one aside. Cool, Legos! Then you turn around and you've got a bunch of other shaped boxes, and you could shake them and feel them and let things slide around, and most of the time you could guess if you played with the enclosed system of the package long enough. You can do similar with the Amazon sales algorithm. With that in mind, no one outside of Amazon actually knows what the sales algorithm calculates. We can make an educated guess on how the Amazon sales algorithm works. And there's two sides to it. The first side is the customer side, what the customer sees, what the recommendations are. The second side is the sales ranking side, where Amazon is going to place our work in the hierarchy of pieces and parts. Another minor tangent. When you play old school style Dungeons and Dragons, first edition kind of stuff, from way back in the day, there was basically 9 alignments. You had good, neutral, evil. You had lawful, neutral, chaotic on your chart. Amazon supposes that they're neutral with the presentation of their algorithm, and which is fair enough. Everybody, you want to strive to be neutral. You don't want to impart this and that. But if you look at the actual descriptions and how the algorithm behaves, the algorithm supports success. The algorithm supports the producers, the authors, the sellers that are making the most money with the highest sales ranking. Fair enough, right? Everybody wants to buy the good product, not experiment with a hit and miss something or other that somebody just threw together. There's certain authors, there's certain products that you just know you want, as opposed to the mock-up makeup. But nobody wants to buy themselves a water filter and find that it's filled with dirt from wherever. You want the legitimate charcoal certified, doesn't have any lead, doesn't have any other kind of weird stuff in it. You want to make sure you're putting good products into your life. Amazon strives to do that. Amazon's goal is to satisfy its customers' need. If we as authors, or if we as product producers, but I'm going to stick with authors for now, if we produce a crappy product that we try to stick onto Amazon's shelf, why is Amazon going to taint its own brand image with our crappy product? Amazon is like true neutral as far as that's concerned. Amazon is only concerned is providing the best possible customer experience for their customers. And if somebody's on the Amazon website, they are Amazon's customer, not yours. That in mind. When you look at the old style Dungeons and Dragons alignment descriptions, the whole good and lawful kind of thing, not really. You get into the chaotic and evil side, not really. There's no chaos in Amazon. It's very ordered for the most part. But if you get into the actual descriptions of the alignments, Amazon supports success, meaning somebody that's selling a crap load of product. But if you go down Amazon, if you're plotting alignments for the Amazon algorithm, it's more like a neutral evil, because it supports you so long as you are strong enough to warrant the support. Classic first edition D&D rules, your orcs, your goblins, your demonic plane kind of stuff. They serve the master that produces. They serve the strength. If author ABC is selling 10,000 units a month, and our little book is selling 1 or 2 units a month, logically, who is Amazon going to support? They're going to support the more powerful Lord, ABC author. Because ABC author Lord is putting out 10,000 units per month in sales consecutively, consistently. If you keep that in mind, and you want to produce quality product for Amazon and list for the Amazon algorithm, you have to understand that. You have to understand how that attention works. Amazon is going to give you attention from its neutral, maybe neutral evil perspective, the algorithm perspective as authors, based upon our success, based upon what we feed the machine. The next step down, when the algorithm is working in our favor, because we are putting a coherent, fan-based audience through the system, what happens is, instead of being that 90, 95, 99% of people who just slap something together and push publish, what happens is, if we put 10 people through the system and 99% of everybody else is just slapping something together, that coherent audience has placed us into the top 1%, guesstimating wise. But right there, you've put yourself into a different plane of existence, a different level of understanding with the machine. On the seller side, for the best sales ranking, as far as I can tell, as far as I've read, as far as I've heard from others who are doing better than me, as far as I can tell, the sales rankings is based on a combination of how much money you're making for Amazon and your total number of units. It's a weighted average somewhere in there, and they are correlated, but it's not a one-to-one. Like, when I was running the bestseller rank for my 2 books, I produced more sales on the first Guardsman book than on the second. But the second book oftentimes ranked higher because it was more expensive. Fewer units moved, more money through the system. While the total number of units moved and the price, the total money that Amazon would make from those units moved is related, it doesn't look, and it hasn't been feeling like it's purely money based. The behavior didn't match, and this was a while ago when I was seeing this. So keep that in mind. You have to move product to make it to the rankings. But once you start making it to the rankings, through your addition of a coherent audience, the machine on the back end starts producing its recommendations for an audience that's similar to. That's the other side of the Amazon algorithm. Like the first 30, 60, 90 days, you're going to get levels of support. Congratulations, new release. Your first 30 days, you're getting lots of support, and you get tied into other authors releasing similar books, etc. And then, 60 days, you're basically showing up on also bought category, which is like a step down. And then at 90 days, you're on your own. But if you haven't established an audience by 60 to 90 days, you get flushed and you get buried under other new stuff. Your promotion period ends at the 30 and 60. So when you're presenting your work, you need to keep a nice, smooth, consistent flow of visitors to your product. And this is for Amazon sales, which is the 9,000-pound gorilla. When you're shopping for things on Amazon, the machine records everything you do. Let's say that we'll use me. I don't look too much at anything beyond science fiction and occasionally history. Those are my 2 big categories. Sometimes, fantasy and stuff like that, from like Tolkien's or Sanderson's or something like that. But if I turn around and I search for one book about a cowboy story, like a Wild West story, as soon as I refresh my Amazon feed, I am going to start getting recommendations for cowboy stories. If you've ever had somebody sit down on your Amazon account when you weren't there, like you stood up while you were browsing and like your wife snuck in while you were like making a sandwich or something, and you come back and you refresh and it's all like frilly underwear and stuff like that, like frilly little girl shirts and stuff, that's because the recently browsed history on your Amazon is so attuned with the most recent searches. That stuff gets displayed in repetition until you basically drown it out with the other searches. So as customers, Amazon's going to present similar stuff to people who are already looking for that kind of stuff. And the way that Amazon determines what those things are is it looks at what people have been searching for and what they have bought based upon. So as soon as I look for that Cowboys and Indians book, what the hell was his name? The Lone Ranger. Say I look for a Lone Ranger book. Even if it's a gift, I'm going to start getting Louis L'Amour kind of books showing up. When you have those two sides of the equation in mind, you have to begin to understand that it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. This is where I'm saying Amazon's more like neutral, but it best serves those who produce. So by the alignment chart, you're the neutral evil kind of thing, where the highest producers get the most support, if that makes sense. You get the most support based upon how much you produce, how you produce. So if you have 100 books per month moving through the system, you should outrank somebody who's just thrown together AI dross. Their cover is horrible and they put zero effort into the book. If you produce a quality work and people are interested in your work, you should be exposed to customers. And that's the goal with Amazon's 30-day new release boost and 60-day follow-up where you're tied into the also bought categories. Those two boosts together is the period when Amazon is trying to establish your audience as a sales algorithm. The more people we roll from outside, from our related friends group, from our email list, from our fan groups, from our video presentations, from our social medias, that constellation of our presence online, feeding relevant people to our work, is really helpful, because what happens is when you have a coherent audience, your coherent audience speaks to Amazon's sales algorithm. When the sales algorithm is being spoken to and is selling to a coherent audience, the algorithm is in line. You're basically putting fuel into the engine. And the Amazon sales algorithm is a very powerful, finely tuned engine. It is a black box, so we don't know exactly what's criteria it's looking at, but it does a really good job at it. And they keep it quiet on purpose because they don't want people gaming the system. When it first came out, you could do things like you could buy reviews. You'd spike your reviews, you'd spike your attention, you'd get those 100 sales, you'd be exposed to customers, and then suddenly everybody was gaming the system. They were paying for 50 people to buy their little book on sale, and then as soon as the sale ended, they'd be ranked super high in the listings. They'd organically pull a bunch of traffic. That traffic would then hopefully keep the book high, and they could climb the ranks higher. That's how people game the system. That's why Amazon keeps it quiet, and the system seems to smooth spikes. If you have a big spike, there's a normalization that goes in. If you give money to 50 of your friends to buy your book on a certain day, and all your friends go and buy your book, you're going to get a spike of 50 people in a day, and then it's going to flatline. Nobody else is going to do anything. Amazon's going to normalize that down to effectively 2 or 3 on that day, because it takes like a rolling average, it seems. And if you have one sale per day for 30 days, you're going to be more effective than if you have a spike of 50. For the algorithm, the more coherent traffic you put in defines your audience of who you're going to show to. The addition of consistent traffic, consistent relevant audience, also puts you where you should be, because you're teaching the machine. If you think of training the algorithm about your work like training a puppy, you have to be consistent with the puppy. Like, you got to take the puppy outside every few hours to do its business in the backyard. You have to take the puppy for walks every day. You can't be inconsistent or you're going to get a misbehaving dog. You have to make sure that you're consistent. If you understand that the algorithm is going to support a powerful author, a powerful online presence that is producing money for Amazon, selling to Amazon's customers, Amazon is going to provide more support in the form of higher rankings. If you're in the top 20 on science fiction with one, maybe two books, you're going to be making a pretty damn good living. If you're in the top 20 of Amazon's overall listing, you're going to be able to feed an entire neighborhood. Those books that are in the top 20 overall are making more in a day than most people make at their jobs in a year. It's scary. Like the power of scale, because it just goes exponential. It's a huge upward curve. In order to get there, in order to do those kinds of things, you need to consistently feed coherent audiences. And I think this is how Andy Weir did it, the author of The Martian. I'm pretty sure his story was he was publishing chapters over a span of years on a science fiction website, and he accumulated a huge email list. And when he finally published the book, what happened was he started sending it out to tranches of his email list, and he consistently delivered on this story that he had polished over the span of years on this online delivery. He published the book. He told everybody on his email list that he had cultivated and nurtured over that time period. And when he released the book to his list of fans, coherent audience, followed him for years. They have similar behaviors online. So Amazon understands how and who to associate with the release of The Martian. When that book comes out, you have tranches of this email list being sent reminders about, hey, if you don't mind, please buy the book. Don't forget to leave your review, blah, blah, blah. Those kinds of interactions with the book drive the algorithm insane. It's a wonderful thing. That's how you know how responsive the algorithm is. By creating that coherent audience, he's now pushed his book for The Martian. He's now pushed his book up higher and higher with his organic traffic. Amazon begins to understand who that organic traffic is, then takes its much larger list and says, okay, these are the people buying this book, The Martian. These are their common characteristics. Let me find 10 times, 20 times that number of people and expose them to The Martian, which is an excellent book, by the way. When you present a quality book to a coherent audience, you train the algorithm over time by feeding it coherent customers over a period of time who consistently buy your work. You're going to develop a track record. You're not going to have that artificial spike where somebody goes out and pays a bunch of VAs to go and pollute the data. That's something else I'll probably talk about later. But basically, when you pollute your data by buying reviews, what happens is those random people with random accounts buy your book. And suddenly what happens is you produce, say you write science fiction. If you write science fiction and you go and pay for reviews from a bunch of VAs, what will happen is those VAs have reviewed a bunch of coloring books. They've reviewed a bunch of cookbooks. They've reviewed a bunch of spiritual books. The data science on those VAs is going to be twisted and convoluted and not match a coherent audience. You are going to kill your own data science. You're going to confuse the Amazon algorithm. A confused buyer never buys. A confused algorithm is never going to support you. It's the same thing. Don't confuse your customers. Don't confuse the computer. That's why I also, like 2 weeks ago, said, send out to a coherent audience. Don't ask your family to review your book. Don't ask your family to buy your book because Aunt June likes the coloring books and Cousin Timmy likes his coloring books because he's 7 years old. 7-year-old is not going to be buying fantasy like the Lord of the Rings. Aunt June only wants to know how to make a better pot roast. So that's not going to help you with your Lord of the Rings fantasy genre. You need to create a coherent audience based upon your work, or you're going to confuse Amazon. If you've got a family of 10 people who buy your book, now you've got a confused audience of 10 people who are only coherent trait is that they're your family. You've basically taught the computer to advertise to your family, and you've capped your own maximum sales. You don't want to sell to your family and friends. You want to sell to your coherent audience. You need to train the Amazon algorithm by driving consistent sales over time. And all you need is that 5 or 10 people per day. Because if you can get 5 to 10 people in some categories, you can be the best seller of 5, 10 books in a month. But if you move 5 people a day from your website or your social medias to your work, the algorithm is going to have a consistent audience that it's going to be able to build upon. If 99.9% of the books on Amazon fall down the memory hole because they're not presented, doesn't matter how well you write. To steal from Robert Kiyosaki, I don't have the best written book. I have the best selling book. If you take that coherent audience over time and you consistently train the algorithm, consistently producing coherent data science for the machine to learn, what'll happen is the machine at some point will get its statistics right. It'll click with the system. The system will start displaying your book to more people who are relevant. But it's only going to support you when you're already having success. Think of your leads, think of your email list, think of your fan base that you have built up while you're building your foundation as an author. Think of them as the fuel, like the primer, like the spark plugs, whatever your analogy you want to use. Your fan base that you're feeding into the machine for each of your works teaches the machine who it needs to show your work to. So if you're moving 5 people a day into Amazon for, say, I don't know, we'll stick with science, we'll go back to coloring books. Say you're moving coloring books and you move 5 people per day into your coloring book. That coherence audience of people looking for your coloring book, 5 people a day, Amazon might take that and say, oh, 5 people per day who look like this are looking for Joe Blogg's coloring book. Let me see if I can find more people like it so we can create more sales. Oh, hey, I showed this book to 100 people, 20 of them bought. You've moved 5 people into the system. 20 more people have bought from Amazon. You've now sold 25 books in a day. If you're making $2 a book, you've made $50 in a day. Forever. Because you're moving consistent traffic into that coloring book that's making $2 a day for you. That's a pretty damn good return. The trick is keeping the audience going. Because Amazon's going to support success. As soon as somebody else is moving 6 people per day into their coloring book, they're going to jump ahead of you. Assuming that they have the same quality or better. That's when you start getting into the reviews, you start getting into the customer handling and stuff like that. So you need you need to have a comprehensive care for your product when you're putting it into Amazon. But the fundamental coherent fan-based traffic that you feed the machine for the Amazon algorithm is the most important primer to get things started. The display that happens on a customer side is derived from Amazon understanding who your book needs to go to. If I, as a customer, take my normal sci-fi and high fantasy browsing history, and I suddenly look at a history book, or I suddenly look at a Cowboys and Indians book, Wild West book, Amazon is going to display like-minded books. Search for the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, and click on all those displayed related works. Go to your main page. You're going to see a bunch of high fantasy. Change your behavior and look for Louis L'Amour. When you look for Louis L'Amour and you start clicking on Louis L'Amour books, it's even more when you actually buy a Louis L'Amour book, or you buy a book. You take an action. When you search for something, that's a minimal weight. When you actually purchase it, that's a much higher weight. If I go and I turned around, recently I purchased 1776 on Audible. 1776 triggered all the other David McCullough books because I purchased it. But now I see David McCullough constantly because 1776. The customer side ties into the customer's behavior. The customer's behavior ties into the audience that we've produced with our coherent email list and fan base. So these common threads that we've produced for our work plug into what tens of thousands of people a day are searching for. That traffic from those tens of thousands of other customers that get presented what the machine thinks our work is. That's why it's so important to have a coherent audience. Not your family, not your high school drinking buddies, not paid for traffic and VAs and all the black hat crap. Don't do the black hat stuff. Amazon's ahead of you. By the time that people have taught that shit, by the time people have done it, turned it into a class, posted it for you to buy, and then you start doing it, Amazon already knows the black hat trick and has blocked it off. That's a fast way to get your account banned. Don't do it. The author's coherent audience for their product, the product's coherent audience, and then the audience behavior marry up at some point. So you've got this massive population, and then some small tranche of that population is searching for these things that our work connects to, that our work is relevant to. As more and more people purchased the book by Andy Weir, The Martian, more and more people were shown the book. And more people began to accept it and realize, gee, this is a really good story. So more and more people bought it. Amazon kept expanding the reader list. What happened was the forest fire, that was The Martian, published so many years ago, turned into a movie, and is still the best selling for sci-fi. That forest fire of a book is a forest fire because it's feeding itself. More people are continually and consistently purchasing it. It's selling something like $30,000, $40,000 a month, I think it was. That's estimated after expenses. And that was the last time I looked. That was a while ago. When you're working with the Amazon algorithm, you need to keep in mind the algorithm does not work for you. You are the product being sold. You are the producer of the product being sold. The algorithm works for Amazon. It will serve and support the people who produce. If you produce, Amazon will support you because it makes money by selling your product. But it's only going to sell your product if your product is any good. In order for it to sell your product, it needs to understand your product. When you understand that, you can make a better decision about how to present your work. If you can present your work correctly, present your coherent audience, it will sell itself. The best way to do that is to have your foundation in place. Have your infrastructure in place. Have your email list in place. Have your social media in place and your website and all the rest of that stuff. And all this comes from me making these mistakes. So this is not like I'm making this crap up. I made my mistakes by publishing my stuff and not having that stuff in place, and I lost it all. This is what it's going to require to get back what I have already done once. That's where I learned all this stuff. It's just years of getting beat on by the algorithm. So getting beat on and studying the algorithm and such like that. I've made a lot of these mistakes. I don't typically go in for the publishing courses and the black hatty kind of stuff, but that's up to you what you choose to do on that. The algorithm is a black box closed system. It doesn't tell you what it is. All we can do is shake the box like a present and guess how it works based upon how it behaves. And large numbers based upon how it behaves, it's heavily weighted by how much you sell. There's also a total number of units in there somewhere. So if like a $99 book is not as weighted as heavily as a $25 book kind of thing. You have to be careful. You can't fight the machine. You have to be considerate. The big tech, they're like the weather. You can't change the weather. You can only change your own behavior. If you want to go out and play golf and wave a metal stick around in the air and you've got thunder and lightning storms bearing down on you, you go right ahead, buddy. I ain't going with you. If it starts raining and thunder and lightning out, maybe movie theater is a better choice. We have to modify our behavior to deal with the situation that is created by the weather, by the big tech, by the ethosphere, whatever you want to call it. We have to move and react to those massive systems. We can't drive them. This is way too long, but I hope that helps somebody. That's how I'm thinking about it. That's how I'm working through it. When you're dealing with the algorithm, you cannot fight it. You have to understand it, feed it what it wants. You have to feed the machine what it needs, and it will take care of you. But you have to do the work. You have to get that email list. You have to get those fans going in and buying 5, 10, 15 books a week, a month, a day, whatever the rate is. But you got to get it to build the audience. Because if you don't build the audience, Amazon doesn't know who the hell you are. Why is it going to support you over Andy Weir? Why is Amazon going to bump Brandon Sanderson in favor of our little piece of work? It's not. Because Brandon Sanderson sells more in a day than we'll make in a decade. There's no way Amazon's going to bump Brandon Sanderson for little old me. You got to keep that in mind, and you have to adjust your behavior accordingly. In order to make it work, we got to feed the machine what it wants. And it wants a coherent audience from the author product side, from the customer side. Those customers in the population, that tranche that's looking for our type of product, Amazon knows who those people are. Amazon's going to make recommendations based upon what they've been looking for. If we want to get into the recommendations for the also bots and those kind of things, we need to have a coherent audience that's actually selling and moving product, or you're just going to fall off the table. I mentioned before that I think it was the first one of these little videos, but there was a young lady who was super proud about her book that she was getting ready to publish on Twitter, X, or whatever the hell it's called, 10. And I'm like, God, I hope this sells for her, because she didn't mention any of the stuff to deal with the algorithm, to drive fans, to backstop and support her work. But this is the meat of this is the meat and the muscle right here. This is, if you can understand the algorithm and set this thing to work for you, build your foundation so that you can go a mile high with the algorithm, you've got a completely different understanding with the world. I hope that helps somebody. Have a great day, and happy Halloween. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Have a good day.